So much of a production designer's job is to establish a world for the film and communicate visually to the audience. So how much do you want the audience to notice your work, and how much do you not want them to notice your work when they're watching? Because it should kind of blend in seamlessly when you into the film and not pull focus from the action on screen.
I think if you're doing it properly, it's in support of the story and the characters, and works subliminally on the audience, and hopefully does not draw attention to itself unless there is a scripted moment where, you know, there's something very specific that will happen scenically, that, you know, is a wow moment or something like that. So I don't know. Do you guys agree?
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
talk.
I just, you know, that we get asked that question a lot, and I don't think of it that way. I think I'm not trying to get people to notice me or not notice me. I'm trying to get them to feel something. Yes. So that's it.
For me, the big thing about filmmaking is to provoke feelings, and that's a very important thing. I think we all aim to the same. I really think that that production design or it's not really an aesthetic discipline. It's more like a narrative discipline. So you have to really understand that what you're doing is to really telling stories. You're to be a storyteller with different tools, you know, color, texture, shape, but you're adding to that. Sometimes you notice it more or not depending on each film, you know, and the way you shoot and the style of the specific film you're working at.
And I think you can achieve authenticity through all of those tools, but you can even have authenticity in the future, as long as it makes sense for the characters when you're building that, you know, the space world. There's authenticity there. You're creating the history and you're creating the, you know, everything behind it, and it should still make sense to the characters. That's always the goal, right?
I would be so mortified if someone came if I would never. I'm sorry. I would never want my work to take away from the story itself. Like what I try to bring to the page or to the screen, I'm sorry, is just to support the emotion and the action that is that's part of the story. So hopefully, I completely agree about the emotional aspect of everything, and it is about like core feeling in a way.
Well, when you start a project, do you prefer to hand draw your designs or do you do it digitally?
Depends on the genre, you know. Period films, definitely hand-drawn. Doesn't feel right digitally. But obviously sci-fi and fantasy really lends itself to that sort of manipulation of hexagonal software, which is how all those things work. Polygraphs, they're all based on hexagonal mesh work. That makes sense for the future. But, you know, my favorite thing to do, I don't know about you guys, but I love taking photos of locations, printing them huge, and just drawing on top of them. It's like the most satisfying, godlike moment of control. And everybody gets to see it and participate in it. And you throw them up all over the office, and you're drawing on top of them, and you just feel like the biggest sandbox on the planet.
Yeah. I mean, sorry. I was very enthusiastic, but yes, I do the same. I take an image and I, you know, use Sharpie and whiteout pen, and I kind of just draw over if it's sort of a location modification and need, or if we're building something based upon an actual place. But yeah, I find that to be the most freeing. Sometimes I'll freehand very loosely if I have to get something quick out, and then kind of hand it off to someone. But I also like SketchUp too. I'll do that. It's kind of whatever will fit the need.
I thought I was the only person who did that. Damn it.
Yeah.
Everyone does it.
Everyone does it. Yeah, I'll do that too. I also use SketchUp as a tool. Like I did the whole precinct in SketchUp and then handed off pieces of it to the set designers to, you know, get it to construction. But I like that tool because I can do a quick fly through of it and show the director all the different angles and specifically lay out some of the scenes as well, because if they have a very specific geography or blocking, I think it's helpful to see that as early as possible so that everyone's aware of how it might work. So I love that tool. I started out doing CAD stuff after drawing. In grad school I was taught CAD, and then as quickly as I could get rid of it, I did and bought into SketchUp full on. So I like that tool a lot.
Yeah, for me it's messy. It's a little bit of everything, and sometimes it's even collecting images and doing a little collage, and then take it that. I really love that moment when you read the script. In this case, I did not know in Roma, but when you read the script, or you're starting to work in a project, and really your senses are completely open to receive things. Even when you're walking in the street and you connect with an idea, and then sometimes you take a little picture of an absurd detail, and that will put it with a drawing or a sketch. For me, that's part of the creative process. It's one of the things that I really enjoy the most.
And it's not the same when you do it digitally.
It's not. Sometimes I glue them digitally too. I'm not afraid of using that tool. I think it all depends on what is your mood in that moment too.
What's the most you guys have had to improvise during production, whether there's like some emergency on set or you lose a location?
Everything always just goes according to plan, so.
Perfect
me
in
too.
every way.
That's amazing. I thought I was the only one on that too.
Yeah. Well, yes, I think we all have the same thing, that you say, why me, why today, why this time is happening? I must be the only one that suffered this thing. I had, like for example, in Pan's Labyrinth, when I did Pan's Labyrinth, we scouted this beautiful forest in which we built the mill and the labyrinth. And it was green and it was fantastic. And then obviously that was the hottest year in 20 years. So basically when we started shooting, well, when we were close to start shooting, there was no green at all. And so we end up basically creating the whole, all the grass was made with with wood. How you say that? With wood pieces like that, mixed with some with the needles of the pines. No, in order to create all of that painted in different colors. So
it's probably more interesting that way, though, right?
Well, it completed the thing, because I think that also chance is an interesting part on that. It plays I have another one which what happened in Romeo and Juliet. When we were doing Romeo and Juliet, we built a set in the beach. Then
Storm.
Then the storm came. It came a storm after we basically showed the set. We showed it on a Friday. Then the storm came, destroyed the set in one night. We spent like 3 months working on that before, and then we had to rebuild it. And they asked us, how long will you take to rebuild it? And we said, well, months again. So Bas went there, saw the destruction and said, okay, this looks like a destroyed set, but if we put out, basically, and it was Catherine Martin as well, if we put out a billboard and recover that and put some stands and stalls, it will somehow work, because we didn't have another chance, and that's the most memorable part of the film, though. No,
That's such a famous story, and I love the image of that.
I was in charge of that set. So.
On Beautiful Boy, the final scene, the final rehab clinic
By the Vines.
By the Vines is also the poster of the movie. We were scouting that location on the Tech Scout 3 days before we were about to start principal photography, and for the first time, 50 people walked into a functional rehab facility, the only functional rehab facility we shot in, and the people in treatment there flipped out, and we lost the location. And we were in love with that location, and we'd chosen all the other rehab based on that final one. We'd retrofitted them all, and the scout continued, and I got in a car with the location manager. We're 3 days away from shooting, and it's first up, and we saw that wall with the vines, driving around, desperately looking for that, and also a New York donut shop, because we had to pair those two that day. So across the street from that, there's a Thai restaurant in shambles, and it was like, this is perfect.
Perfect for a donut shop.
And 72 hours later, we shot those two, and I can't even. I mean, the director was telling me the other day he can't even remember what the rehab clinic, what that we wanted was, that he based his entire visual journey on. He can't remember it because we got so lucky by being so unlucky.
I was shooting in Rhode Island, and we were doing this little movie, and it was a horrible winter, and every morning I'd go out to my car, and it would be covered in snow, just feet and feet of snow. It just was never ending. It was February, and we got to the end of the shoot, and we had snow for all of our exteriors all this time, and all of a sudden the weather got beautiful, and all the snow was gone, and we were doing all our big exteriors. And so after all this snow, like mountains and mountains of snow, we had to go truck snow in for the last exteriors, and I found myself with a shovel, like moving snow on the day. It's like you just never know what's gonna happen. It's the worst.
I'm sorry, I'm still trying to.
You're lucky.
Nothing's ever
I mean,
gone
to
wrong.
be quite honest, like, oh my God, it is. It's PTSD. Like, I should remember these things, but I think I'm like, okay, move on. Yeah, but I think whenever something bad happens, usually a beautiful moment arises. So, yeah, so whenever that happens, it's sort of you take it and you process it and move on, and it's usually better than what you had conceived to begin with. So maybe that's why I don't remember a specific instance, but yes.
Was there a detail that you included in each of your films that you think the audience may not notice on first watch?
I love to play for the actors as well. I really respect the craft of putting yourself in the skin of somebody else. So as much as I can, I try to really give them, or really give them details that make them really believe and build their character. Some of them make it to the movie, some of them they don't. Probably they're in the drawers or behind there. But for me, that's I think that's an important thing to help them feel in their space. I try to speak with them, before we start, in order to try to build it together with the director, and sometimes it is possible, sometimes it's not. But based on those conversations, I try to really put a lot of personal details, even sometimes mail with their name and their address and things that talks about the background too.
Yeah, I don't think I really think of it that way, about what's on screen versus not, or what's focused on versus not.
Sometimes you don't know what's gonna be photographed too.
Well, you
right?
never know.
Really
It's yeah.
You never know.
I think of it more like a. I think of it more like a process. It's I think of it like a going to a museum, and the curator of the museum wouldn't be upset if you'd missed a painting. If they wanted you to experience the emotions that it causes you, they want to transport you for a period of time away from wherever you were before you went in and wherever you're going when you get out. But it's like the reason I care about what's in the drawers and the mail that's unread and the mail that is, and what's been saved and what's been thrown out. That's just, it's because it's my way in. It's how I get into the character's head and hopefully help them to create a better performance, and then how they will end up shooting it. It's not so that you see it all, it's because I don't know how else to do it. You're creating a three-dimensional world from scratch. All the details are important, and if you miss one or two, they're irrelevant, I think. it's the sum total.
Definitely with sets, I like to make sure that it's a 360 experience for any of our actors to play in. So I always find that it's really good to be prepared, that they can touch and open and do things that maybe aren't necessarily called out, because I've also worked with some, where it's really found in the blocking and the rehearsal. It's not really, we're going to do this angle mastered, I've found kind of rarely unfolds in that way. So it's definitely creating this. I don't want to say a padded cell. That sounds so negative, but just really enveloping the actors and making sure that it feels authentic and real for them to live in.
Every object that's on the set is part of that cumulative effect. I think it's important for everything to be as much as you can to be authentic as possible. That's always the goal, and that will show up. Like it will help the actors do their job, which winds up in the camera, which is that's what you see. And if you're doing it right, it all works together to make it more authentic and more believable.
And finally, what's one set you've seen in another movie, not one of yours, that you wish was real and you could live in?
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Anything in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Good answer.
The whole thing.
I really don't wish, I don't choose to live in it, but I wish that was real, is the entire world in Brazil. Like, I would have loved to kind of just participate in that world, but I kind of do. It's so weird.
Jeez, why?
It's so weird. I mean, that's what drew me into this. I don't know. It's so bizarre.
It is
Visited
bizarre.
periodically.
Yeah, periodically from afar, maybe not having my skin stretched to pieces. But, it's like, I don't know. It's weird. I don't want to live there. I don't want to live there, but...
I mean, there are many, like sometimes when you see a period film, you say, I should be, living in that period. And I think that's a beautiful thing about films. But definitely I would say Raiders of the Lost Ark as well, that's so cool.
You can live there together.